Hello. Can you guys hear me? That was extremely embarrassing. Sorry about that. All right, I'm Gene. I came here from Boston just to teach you guys a class that usually takes about 2 days and is about 180 slides. I'm going to teach it to you in 10 minutes because that's all the time they gave it to me. And I hope it gives you a perspective, I think, on the panel as well from where we come from for about dual use. So in the U.S., we've been doing this defense tech stuff for a while, and I personally have been teaching a class on dual-use ventures. Here, let me flip real quick. I've been teaching. Oh wow, the logos didn't come through, but imagine lots of really interesting and impressive logos up there. So this is kind of my life. I'm a colonel in the U.S. Air Force Reserve. I spent about 12 years on active duty, another 12 on reserves. I'm a lecturer and a director at MIT, and then I also did some startup work. The point here is not to show off all the logos. The point here is to explain, I kind of live in the dual-use space. I have this kind of weird, bifurcated brain where I spend a lot of my time in the civilian world, a lot of my time in the military world, and it's shaped a lot of the stuff that we teach. We've run a dual-use ventures class for about 4 or 5 years, a dual-use ventures accelerator, really focused on defense and dual-use as a strategy. So I'm going to give you guys a taste of what we teach to kind of create the context of kind of at the very end. The point of the presentation is that really the key to successful dual-use startups exited to make everybody a lot of money is really a common language. And that's what I see is missing in most of the situations is the inability for one side to understand the other and vice versa. So here's what we teach startups. We start off with, sorry, some of these slides didn't get across very well, so some of the wording seems to be off, but we kind of give them an understanding of a lot of the funding problems. So we start out with a simple system dynamics model here that just says, hey, there's two sides of this funding chain. There's the dilutive and non-dilutive capital. We'll talk about it in a second. There's VCs, and then there's the government stuff over here. And basically, they have very simple jobs. Okay, VCs, their job is to create return for their LPs and GPs, right? That is the point of a VC. It's to create return on their investment. And the government's jobs are to spend money and have hard problems, right? And then you as a startup, you have your journey as it goes along, and you get your money from both of those sources, dilutive or non-dilutive. It gets easier and easier to do that as we go along, kind of in the global ecosystem. And then as you go along, you either feed back return to the VCs, or you create a new industrial base for the government. Pretty simple. That's the framework that we start off by teaching the startups. We often spend a lot of time on semantics. You're going to hear this theme over and over again. Language is important. Definitions are important. It's how we communicate. It's how we are able to show intent to each other. And so we start off with just explaining what innovation is. I'm going to go super fast through this, so you're not going to get me reading off all these different slides, but if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. One of the most important pictures we paint for them is how complicated. You can't see any of those words, but trust me, it wouldn't matter if you could, because it's not helpful. But this is oftentimes the way the U.S. DoD and basically the global government ecosystem tries to project what they do, right? So they give some kind of, if you saw what those words are, it's the United States S&T ecosystem, the science and technology ecosystem in the Department of Defense. That whole thing, you're supposed to actually read and somehow understand. It's not helpful in any way, and then we explain to the startups that this is what you're dealing with. We define dual use. We spend a lot of time explaining that dual use is a strategy. It's not a sector. And that the dual-use strategy is basically about just pursuing both defense and commercial markets and funding and being opportunistic when you have the opportunity to be. Again, for audiences like this, maybe it seems pretty straightforward, but for a startup that's only ever thought about going and getting VC money, sometimes you have to explain the purposes of non-dilutive capital, that there are all of these government agencies, they have these hard problems, they have these missions they want to accomplish, and they want to give you money, but it's not the way that you're used to taking money. It's this non-dilutive stuff, and that you can't really use it to build your company. You can't apply for a grant from the National Science Foundation in the United States and say, I'm going to use this money to hire 3 communications people and 2 business development staff. You're not getting a grant that way, but if you say we're going to build our technology and have it along some kind of roadmap that leads to a capability for you, the government, then they'll fund that, right? So fundamental first principles of dual use. We get into this debate about, I went to business school, so I'm required on any presentation to put up a 2x2 chart. It's in the contract. This is the general 2x2 where you say like, okay, what kind of dual use company are you? Are you defense focused? Are you primary defense, secondary commercial focus? And the key to this slide is showing them that there's all these different ways to live, but that you don't have to choose. You don't have to pick one side or the other. Today, you could be a commercial defense company, and then next thing you know, if you got a $2 million grant from DARPA, now you're a defense commercial company. And you can live in those worlds. You can be quantum in that way. You can kind of be at both places at once, depending on who's looking. A really important thing we do is we teach them the mental models that they should use to access the customer. Now, this is important for any customer, especially important for the defense or the government customer, because, again, how complicated and convoluted and maybe unnatural it is to some that haven't been in the ecosystem. So one of the things we've done, I teach so I wrote the curriculum and teach NATO Diana, for those that know what that program is. When we put that together, we really wanted to kind of customize the curriculum for obviously the NATO and mostly European startups. So we kind of did a little digging and found that there just in NATO countries, there's at least 5 different ways that the governments buy, right? And so just in the US, you can't access the Army and the Air Force. It's just such a huge, the Defense Department is $1 trillion budget. It's such a huge ecosystem. You have to we're working with the Air Force over here, and then we're working with the Army, and they don't talk to each other. And then across all the other countries, there's all of these different models. And again, just understanding that there's a different model for each different country that you work with is a start. It's a different paradigm. It's a shift, okay? This is usually a very interesting moment when you try to explain to a startup founder that's just looking to talk to someone in the government that there's actually at least 3 different, if not 5 different customers that you have to access. You have to talk to the authorizer, to the user, to the payer. They're all different people. And if you're talking to someone, they say, I really want your product, well, that's just the beginning of the journey. You didn't actually find necessarily the person that's going to pay for it. And eventually what happens is they start thinking about it in this way. This is just I had one of my startups put together kind of a map of what kind of funding they got and from where. And you can see university prizes, investments, creators, phase 1 small business grants. So all of this is just one startup, and they were about 2 or 3 years in at the point where they built this. And so that's just for startups. That's our dual use ventures class, just to teach the startups. On the other side, we have lots of governments, organizations that come to us and say, I want to understand how the other half lives. I've been in the government for 30 years. I don't understand how it works. So we literally have to teach them the one-on-ones. Here's how a startup works. They go to work every day. They don't know if they're going to put food on the table. They don't have a salary like you do, right? Why startups fail. Again, basic stuff that maybe everybody in this business already knows, but if you've been in the government 30 years, you don't know. We have to, they love talking about the Valley of Death. Everybody, if you walk around the Pentagon in the US, you'll hear Valley of Death every 5 feet. Somebody's talking about the Valley of Death because they learned it by watching Silicon Valley on HBO. You have to explain to them that you could live in the Valley of Death as a startup for your entire, until your exit. You don't know what you're doing half the time. You're going back and forth trying to figure out, are you pivoting today? Much less, do you know where you're going to get your funding? I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to zoom through these. We give them the 101s of VC. There's a really great presentation from Upfront Ventures from 2016, but still excellent, about VC math. It shows them the real way VCs work. The real point of VC is to create that 33x plus for their return to their investors, to their LPs. And we talk about the program called Idea Week that teaches executives how to think like entrepreneurs. But with my last few seconds, this is kind of what we got to. And again, you can't really read this very well, but it's the MIT dual-use readiness model. The reason we built this, and this is for startups to basically evaluate themselves. And there's a million readiness levels out there. Everybody knows the technology readiness levels. The reason we built this is to break down that language barrier. Because ideally what you could do is you could go onto this system and look up your commercial funding readiness level, your commercial customer readiness level, your mission funding readiness level, mission customer readiness level, and understand where you are at that moment, but more importantly, where you have to be progressing on those different readiness scales to continue progressing as a startup, both for the mission customer and the commercial customer, okay? Now, I'd love to dive much deeper into this. This is obviously something I've spent a lot of time developing, but my time is up, but I'll be on the panel, so if you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.